If you have an online course, membership, or group coaching program, you probably know by now the importance of having customer success stories and testimonials in your business. But chances are you aren't leveraging them to their full potential. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 3 aspects of leveraging stories inside of your business, and I'm going to share some tips with you to expand your thinking so that you can get more mileage out of every story that you have. If you have a course, membership, or group coaching program, it's important that you understand the power of storytelling in your business. Now, chances are you've probably used testimonials or shared customer success stories when you've been trying to sell people into your program. And that is important. But did you know that stories can also be really valuable when it comes to keeping members for longer? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So just to go back to the basics, what is a story? Well, when I think about story, I think about communicating the results that somebody has gotten inside of your business. So this isn't necessarily somebody just saying you're awesome and giving you a thumbs up with a review. This is when somebody actually has made progress. Doesn't have to be a big win all the time. It can be a small win. That's totally fine. But they've made some type of progress by using your services or being a part of your program. And you want to communicate that story to somebody else. Now, sometimes these are just communicated in screenshots that you've taken from inside of your community. Sometimes it's a longer video that you've recorded. Maybe it's something formal that you've done. I have one client that just put together like a PDF case study report on one of the people who were in their program and got amazing results. There's lots of different ways that you can communicate a story, but the goal is that you're showcasing the results that somebody has gotten by being in your program. So it goes without saying, if you don't have an online program, you're probably not ready to be thinking about telling stories. Now, if you have an online program, but you can't find any stories to tell, the problem may not be your story collecting ability. It may be your ability to actually help people get results. So before I get into the story aspect, I just want to emphasize that telling a great story, whether you're using it for sales and marketing or for retention, it all starts with actually having a program that gets people results. So if you're struggling to get stories, then you need to start there. Look at your program, look at the problems that people are facing, and make sure that your program is crafted in the best way possible to get people moving forward and making progress towards that transformation or goal that you sold them on. Okay, so assuming you have an online program and that it's actually a good program and you're getting people results, now let's talk about stories and the importance of story. So we all know that stories are really great at marketing. When you tell the story, the results that somebody else has gotten inside of your program, it's likely to help you close the sale. But I want you to be thinking about how you can leverage stories inside of your program as well. Because did you know that the mentality around storytelling with the sell is the exact same mentality that you can be using within your program? It helps people overcome objections. It helps them see that this is possible for them and to build belief that they can make that same progress because somebody like them has made that progress as well. It builds trust too, which is really important, especially in the sales cycle. But more importantly, it builds this belief that I can do this. I can overcome this setback. This is possible for me. And within your program, chances are that people are going to encounter doubts and disbelief. Maybe they're just going to have a bad day and they're going to hit a roadblock. Or maybe they've reached a certain milestone and now they're ready for the next milestone. I want to encourage you to be using stories inside of your program to help motivate people to keep moving forward, to help motivate people to make forward progress and to help them overcome those limiting beliefs and objections that they may have as they come into your program as a newbie or as they're reaching that next milestone. So if you're not using stories inside of your orientation and onboarding process, I encourage you to weave those in. If you aren't using stories when, let's say, you roll out a new deliverable or training that you've taught in another capacity that's gotten people results, then I encourage you to do that. If you're not using stories to get people to watch the replays of the live trainings that you did, meaning you do a live training inside of your program, but maybe only 20% of your people showed up live for it. Well, how have people gotten results from that? And how can you use their stories to compel the other 80% of people to actually show up and watch the replay of that training? Do you see what I'm getting at? Stories can be leveraged in 1,000 ways across your business. So you understand how valuable stories are when it comes to getting more customers and keeping them longer, but do you really understand how to leverage stories in your business? Well, if you're like most people that I've worked with, you don't. You know it's important, but you aren't quite sure what you need to be doing. So let's just talk about these 3 key aspects to stories inside of your business. So if you're listening to this on the podcast right now, you may want to hop on over to YouTube because I've got a little visual here, but I'll do my best to explain my kindergarten drawings. But at the top here, we have this little bucket, all of these beautiful people getting their stories into the bucket. And this is all about collecting stories. Now, you may find that collecting stories is pretty easy for you. You may have a culture of sharing wins, a culture of progress, like I teach inside of my program. That culture of progress is really important. But I know a lot of people haven't been able to cultivate that, or maybe you're in a community where it's more challenging for people to share openly the progress that they're making inside of your program. So you may actually be struggling to get wins, to get people to share the results that they're getting inside of your program. So you need to have a strategy around collecting stories. And one of the things I'll say about collecting stories is that it's often so much simpler than we make it out to be. 99.9% of the time, when I talk to people who are struggling to get stories from their buyers, do you know what they say? That they are having a hard time asking. It all starts with asking. Are you asking people inside of your community to share their progress and wins? When somebody direct messages you about your program, do you ask them about the progress that they've made? When you send a survey out to get feedback about something in your program, are you asking them to share their wins and their progress? You should always be asking your people to share their stories. And there are lots of ways to do that, but I just want you to keep it simple right now and know that you need to ask. So once we have asked and now we have all of these wins and stories collecting in our bucket, the next thing that we run into is the biggest challenge that most online program owners face, and that is organizing the stories. Now, if you're like I was for many, many years, all of my stories that I collected from the people that I had worked with just went to die in the graveyard of screenshots on my desktop. All they were doing was collecting digital dust. Like, really, I had a desktop that was full of screenshots of praises that my clients and people that had been a part of my workshop had sent me via email, Facebook. It didn't matter. They were all collecting the same digital dust on my desktop because I didn't have them effectively organized. And most of the time when I'm working with clients, they're experiencing the same thing. They've done something to start collecting stories, so they've got a few great stories that they're cycling through, but they don't have stories organized really well. So when we're working on a sales page or we're talking about writing an onboarding email and we begin thinking about those objections and we're trying to find stories that meet those objections, guess what? They can't find them. And they don't have the resources to give to a team member to dig through hundreds of screenshots or hours of video to find that one snippet to put into an email. So just as important as collecting stories is how you're going to organize your stories. And I don't mean, are you going to put them in a Dropbox folder or a Slack channel or a Google Drive? I mean, how are you actually going to categorize your stories? I want you to think about filing them away, and they get different tags and topics that are associated with different objections or different people that you serve, or different programs, or different milestones within your program. How are you organizing your stories? Now, this is really important because you want to make sure that you and your team can find the right story to speak to the right person at the right time. And that requires a really great organization system. Okay, so we've collected our stories. Now we have them beautifully organized. And the last challenge that we face is this one. It's actually telling the stories and sharing the stories. How many of you know online program owners and entrepreneurs that tell these same success stories over and over and over again? Well, hopefully it doesn't mean that they've only gotten 2 or 3 people results in their program. Usually what it means is that they don't have this kind of system in place. They don't have a way of regularly and consistently collecting stories. They don't have a system that they're using to actually organize those stories. And so they just share the same ones on repeat. We don't want you doing that. We want you to have a plethora of stories to be able to tell. But once you have that, once you have all of these stories and they're all organized, where do you tell them? How do you share them? That can be a challenge for a lot of people. In fact, I bet you're probably thinking right now, well, I'm actually really good at this. I have success stories on my website or on my sales page. I talk about success stories in my launch or in my training videos or whatever it might be. But like I mentioned earlier, chances are you are not leveraging these stories to their maximum capacity or even half capacity. Are you using stories inside of your training videos to showcase how people are using your training and getting results? Are you using stories inside of your program to help people make more progress and overcome objections? And not even like where to share stories or when to share stories, but how to share them. Do you know what makes a compelling story? Well, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I've done research on all of this, and I could get into the science of storytelling with you, but I'm not going to do that. But I do want you to expand your thinking when it comes to when, how, and where you can be sharing stories. Start asking yourself, is there a story that I can tell that can really showcase the point I'm trying to make? Or is there a story that I can tell that can provide proof of or validation of the work that I've done and the results that I can get? Is there a story that I can tell that can help them see somebody else that has made this progress so that it's more believable to them that they can make that progress themselves? So this system right here, this 3 parts of stories inside of your business is really important to be aware of, because chances are maybe you just have one of them and not all of them. But it starts with collecting stories, and not just once or at the end of your program, but consistently throughout the entire experience on a regular basis. You want to have a funnel to collect stories inside of your business. And then when it comes to organizing stories, we don't just want to throw them onto our desktop or into a file folder. We want to actually be organizing them with a system that helps us utilize those stories in the future so that we can always get to the right story for the right person at the right time. And then finally, sharing these stories. We want to make sure that we share stories in a compelling way and that we're leveraging them as often as possible. Okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. I've been working with stories for over a decade. In fact, I remember when I was first working in corporate, back in 2008 or 2009, we were working on a national advertising campaign. And part of the work that we decided to do was based on a concept that I created that involved having doctors go live online back in the day and people could ask them their questions. And that generated this concept of how do we connect doctors and connect patients and what does that look like? And the entire campaign, the national advertising campaign, became a story-based campaign where we told not just patient stories, but we told stories of the care providers as well for this hospital. And that was really the beginning of my journey into storytelling and its importance in business. And that was over a decade ago. And working with all of these online business owners and knowing the importance of story, I had to create a strategy and system for them to be able to collect and organize and share their stories in an easier way. And in the past, I've only taught this inside of my in-person workshop, but just recently, I did bring that online. I have my Streamline story system available. And so if this is something that you're interested in, I don't do this often. So if you're one of these people that understand the value of story inside of your business, and you know that inside of your community, you have some hidden gem stories that you need to uncover, I do want to help you be able to uncover those stories and shine a spotlight on them. So if you're interested, you can take a look at my Streamline story system. This is my story collecting and organizing system, and you can get access to that at streamlinedstorysystem.com. And because you are a podcast listener, I want to give you a coupon code to get a discount on that system and the bonus Story Masters training that comes with it. And that discount code is creators. So if you put in the word creators into the coupon code box when you go to streamlinestorysystem.com, you'll be able to get a discount for being a podcast listener. But even if you don't get my Streamline Story System, I want you to take an inventory of the stories inside of your business. And I want you to ask yourself, do you have the stories that you need in order to speak to each of your potential customers, your existing members and community, and the roadblocks and challenges that they need to overcome and that they'll face on their journey, and to speak to those early objections that people have when they're deciding to purchase your program? And if not, it's time to come up with a really good system for collecting more stories that speak to those different people and their different objections and the different goals that they have, and make sure that you have a really solid system for organizing them. Otherwise, collecting all of those stories is just a waste because they're not going to be leveraged if they're not easily accessible. All right, so if you know anyone who has an online program and that gets people results that are worth telling, then I want you to share this episode with them so that you can expand their thinking about how to leverage stories inside of their business. And if you haven't yet, go to streamlinestorysystem.com to take a look at my system and my bonus Story Masters training to see if it's a fit for you. And don't forget, use coupon code CREATORS to get a nice little discount on the system. All right, I will see you next week.